She was left for dead after losing her legs. Only the most feared mountain man refused to leave her. The snow was falling hard when her own kin turned their backs, leaving her broken in the dirt with wolves closing in. Everyone thought she was finished, but out of the timberline came the man they all feared, the reclusive giant who never showed mercy. He carried her to his lonely cabin and did the unthinkable. He saved her, yet whispers spread fast. Soldiers came, accusing him of crimes he did not commit. They said she was his hostage. They said he was a traitor. But the truth was far more dangerous, because what bound them together was stronger than fear, stronger than shame, and strong enough to shake an entire town. Will she be remembered as the girl they left to die, or the miracle that redeemed the most feared man in the West? The late autumn wind whipped through the mountains, carrying the first bitter kiss of winter. Wagon wheels creaked as the small train of settlers pushed forward. Inside the covered wagons, families huddled together for warmth. Aaliyah sat quietly beside her father on the wagon seat. The rough wooden bench seemed to shrink with each mile, forcing her against the wagon's edge. Her father's jaw worked silently as he gripped the reins, his face set in familiar lines of disappointment. "You're slowing us down," he muttered, not looking at her. "Should have left you with your aunt in Kansas." The words cut deep, though they weren't new. Aaliyah pulled her thin shawl tighter. The first flakes began to fall as dusk approached. The lead wagon called for making camp, but before they could circle up, sharp cracks split the air. Gunfire. Aaliyah's heart leaped into her throat as riders emerged from the timber, their shouts mixing with the panic of horses. "Raiders!" The cry went up as chaos erupted. Their own team bolted, the reins slipping from her father's grasp. The wagon wheel caught a boulder, and suddenly the world tilted. Aaliyah felt herself thrown sideways. The impact drove the breath from her lungs. Sharp pain exploded through her lower body as the wagon's weight came down, pinning her legs beneath the heavy wheel. Through tears of agony, she saw the other wagons fleeing. "Papa!" she cried, her voice lost in the wind. "Please, don't leave me." But the wagons grew smaller and smaller, disappearing into the storm. No one looked back. The snow fell harder as darkness crept in. Aaliyah's legs had gone numb. She tried praying, but the words froze in her throat. The wind carried new sounds now. The haunting howls of wolves drawing closer. Time blurred. Consciousness came in waves. A shadow loomed suddenly before her, solid and real. Aaliyah blinked away ice-crusted tears. A tall figure stood studying her, broad-shouldered and still as stone, a rifle slung across his back. The stories came rushing back, tales whispered around campfires of Ryan Cutter, the mountain man who walked the high country alone. He knelt beside her, and she saw his face in the dim light, weathered like old leather, a scar running along his jaw. But his eyes, when they met hers, held something unexpected. Not the coldness of a killer, but a deep, measured calm. "Your legs," he said, his voice rough as granite. "Bad break. Might be worse." He studied the wagon, then the darkness. "Wolves are coming down. Storm's driving them." "Please," Aaliyah whispered, her lips numb with cold. "I don't want to die here." Cutter was silent for a long moment. "I've buried enough," he said finally. "Not tonight." He shrugged off his heavy cloak, wrapping it around her shoulders. Working quickly, he leveraged the wagon wheel just enough to pull her free. The pain nearly drove her into darkness, but his strong arms caught her, lifted her against his chest. She felt the warmth of him through the cloak, heard the steady beat of his heart. "Hold on," he murmured, turning toward the timber. "Cabin's not far." Through the curtain of snow, Aaliyah caught glimpses of the abandoned wagon growing smaller behind them. Her old life was disappearing with it. Fresh tears froze on her cheeks, but they weren't all from pain. The wind howled and wolves answered in the distance. But Cutter's stride never faltered as he carried her deeper into the forest. As consciousness began to slip away again, the last thing she remembered was his voice, low and certain. "Stay with me, girl. Dawn's coming." Then the storm swallowed everything. The wind howled like a living thing as Ryan Cutter made his way uphill. Aaliyah lay bundled in his arms, her breath coming in shallow gasps. "Nobody coming back," she murmured, her voice thin and distant. "Left me there." She drifted off again. Ryan tightened his grip, surprised to find himself whispering words he hadn't spoken in years. Lord, if you're listening, he muttered through clenched teeth, help me get her through this night. The prayer felt strange on his tongue. He hadn't called on God since raiders had taken his own family, leaving him with nothing but vengeance for company. A wolf's howl echoed through the timber, closer now. The girl in his arms shivered violently, and he could feel the wet warmth of blood seeping through her skirts. Finally, the dark bulk of his cabin emerged from the swirling snow. He shouldered through the door, kicking it shut against the wind. He lit a torch, casting jumping shadows across the rough walls. Ryan laid Aaliyah on his cot, unwrapping the blood-soaked blankets from her legs. What he saw made his jaw clench. Both legs were mangled beyond saving, the bones showing white through torn flesh. Outside, wolves circled closer. They could smell the blood. Ryan moved quickly, gathering what he needed. His sharpest hunting knife, heated in the fire until it glowed. Strips of linen, herbs he dried for bleeding and pain, and a dusty bottle of brandy. His hands shook as he laid out the crude tools. He was no doctor, but he'd seen enough battlefield surgery to know what needed doing. Without amputation, infection would take her within days. Girl, he said roughly. Her eyes fluttered open, glazed with pain. This is going to hurt something fierce, but it's got to be done if you want to live. You understand? Aaliyah focused on him. Do it, she whispered. Just don't leave me alone. Ryan nodded, helping her drink some brandy. I ain't going nowhere. He positioned the torch and took a deep breath. Keep your eyes on me now. He began his grim work, trying to block out her cries as he cut through flesh and bone. Between strokes, he whispered, You're stronger than you know. Stay with me now. Aaliyah thrashed, her fingers clawing at the rough blankets. Ryan worked as quickly as he dared. The torch burned low as he finished. She had fallen into a merciful unconsciousness by the time he tied the last bandage. Ryan slumped against the wall exhausted. Outside, the storm was breaking. He had done what he could. It was mid-morning when Aaliyah finally stirred. Ryan saw the moment awareness returned, saw her eyes widen as she tried to move, and found her body change forever. Tears welled up as she lifted the blanket with trembling hands. Had to be done, Ryan said quietly. Infection would have taken you. Aaliyah stared at the bandaged stumps where her legs had been, her breath coming in short gasps. But Ryan saw something else in her face too, a desperate search for understanding. He moved closer, resting his calloused hand next to hers. You're alive, he said firmly. That means God ain't done with you. Aaliyah turned her face toward him, really looking at him for the first time. Something shifted in her eyes. Not acceptance, but a spark of possibility. Her fingers moved slightly, touching his hand. Thank you, she whispered, her voice raw, for not leaving me. Ryan nodded, uncomfortable with gratitude. Rest now. You've got healing to do. As Aaliyah drifted back to sleep, her breathing steadier, Ryan found himself watching the sun sparkle on the snow-covered peaks. He hadn't saved anyone in a long time, hadn't wanted to, but this girl's courage had awakened something he'd thought long dead. Fever gripped Aaliyah in the days that followed. Time blurred into a hazy stream of fevered dreams. Through it all, Ryan's presence remained constant. He moved through the cabin with quiet purpose. Every few hours, she felt the cool touch of a damp cloth on her forehead and the rim of a tin cup against her lips, offering broth. Small sips now, he would murmur. Keep fighting. In her lucid moments, Aaliyah watched him. His weathered hands, scarred from years in the wilderness, moved with surprising gentleness as he changed her bandages. Nights were the hardest. As darkness fell, wolves would gather, their howls piercing the thin walls. Each cry sent tremors through her body, memories flooding back. But whenever she opened her eyes, she found Ryan beside her bed, his rifle across his knees, the firelight catching the watchfulness in his eyes. They won't come near, he would say. Not while I'm here. In her fever dreams, voices from the past tormented her. Her father's words cut deep. Nothing but a burden. Worthless. Should have left me, she whispered one night, tears sliding down her temples. A rough hand touched her shoulder. Ryan stood there holding a worn Bible. Here, he said. When you've got strength enough, would you read some? My eyes don't see fine print anymore. Aaliyah's fingers traced the familiar shape. You want me to read to you? Might help pass the time, he said, settling back in his chair. It was a simple request, but it pushed back against the darkness. Here was something she could do. Even now, the steady chunk of his axe-splitting wood became a comfort, marking the passage of time. He rarely spoke, but his presence carried its own conversation. One evening, as the first wolf calls echoed, Aaliyah finally voiced the question that had haunted her. Why didn't you leave me? Ryan was silent for so long she thought he might not answer. When he finally spoke, his words were heavy. Because no one should die alone. The truth of it struck her deep. This man everyone feared had looked at her and seen not a burden, but a human being worthy of dignity. Tears welled in her eyes, but these were different from the tears of shame. Something new was taking root. Ryan cleared his throat, uncomfortable. Rest now. Tomorrow we'll see about getting you sitting up proper. Would you like to hear some verses first? Aaliyah asked. He paused, then settled back in his chair with a nod. Reckon I would. Her voice was weak but grew stronger as she read, The Lord is my shepherd, I shall not want. Outside, the wolves sang their lonely songs, but inside, two souls kept company against the night. The fever still came and went, but its hold was weakening. Each day brought more clarity. She began to understand that while the wagon wheel had taken her legs, it had also delivered her to someone who saw her value beyond her body's ability to walk. The mountain winter settled in, bringing both isolation and a strange kind of peace. As Aaliyah's strength returned, Ryan began teaching her ways to be useful from her bed. These potatoes need peeling, he said one morning. Her first attempts were clumsy, but she gradually found the rhythm. By midday, she had a small pile of clean potatoes. The achievement felt like climbing a mountain. Ryan nodded at her work. Good. We'll make stew tonight. The days followed a pattern. While Ryan went hunting, Aaliyah would mend his torn shirts or string dried herbs. The ordinary sounds of survival wrapped around her like a blanket. One afternoon, she heard him working differently outside. What are you making? She called. Something to help you walk again, he answered after a pause. Crude thing, but I've seen Indian warriors use similar. Leather cups, fitted right, can bear weight. Aaliyah fell silent, touched by his thoughtfulness, but afraid to hope. The scripture readings became the heart of their evenings. As darkness gathered, Aaliyah would open the worn Bible. Ryan would sit listening, and she noticed how certain verses seemed to catch him. When she read about mercy, about lost lambs, his hands would go still. The snow deepened, drifting against the cabin walls. Their world shrank, but it didn't feel confining. Then came the afternoon she decided to try sitting up without help. Ryan was outside chopping wood. The steady rhythm of his axe gave her courage. For a moment she managed it. Her heart soared. Then her weakened muscles gave way, and she collapsed. Pain shot through her, but it was nothing compared to the despair that crashed over her. Tears came in a flood. All the frustration, all the shame of being called worthless poured out at once. She didn't hear the cabin door open until Ryan knelt beside her bed. I can't do anything, she sobbed. I'm useless. Stop that. His voice was firm. He pulled her hands away from her face. You've got fire enough to shame any man I've met. I've seen you fight fever that would have killed most. Stop believing lies others told you. His words cut through her tears. She saw herself in his steady gaze, not as a burden, but as someone with a strength he respected. That night she found herself moved to pray. Not a desperate plea, but the quiet communion of a soul finding its way back to faith. Thank you, she whispered into the darkness, for sending him, for showing me I'm not what they said. Ryan's breathing was steady in his chair, but she knew he'd wake at the slightest sound. His presence was a space where healing could happen, not just of her body, but of her spirit. The first hints of spring whispered through the valley. Icicles dripped from the cabin's eaves. Ryan approached Aaliyah's bed with determination. Time you felt some sun on your face. Aaliyah's heart leaped. Outside? But how? Same way I brought you in, he said simply, wrapping her in a warm blanket. His arms were sure as he lifted her, cradling her against his chest. The cabin door creaked open. Fresh mountain air filled her lungs. Ryan carried her to a broad stump he'd prepared. settling her upon it. "It's so beautiful," she breathed, tilting her face toward the sun. Ryan stood beside her, his usual stoic expression softening. The valley spread below them, patches of snow gleaming between stands of pine. "The Lord makes all things new," Aaliyah quoted softly. Ryan nodded, but something caught his eye. His posture stiffened. Far below, barely visible, riders moved along the valley floor. Their uniforms marked them as United States Cavalry. Aaliyah didn't notice, too absorbed in watching a pair of chickadees. Ryan kept his voice carefully neutral. "Getting chilly. Best get you back inside." That afternoon, while Aaliyah napped, Ryan made his monthly trip to the trading post. The small supply station was unusually crowded with soldiers. He lingered in the shadows, listening. "Raid was too well planned," one soldier was saying. "Had to be an inside man. That mountain devil cutter, he knows every trail." "Wouldn't put it past him," the trader replied. "Man's gone wild. Heard he's keeping some poor crippled girl hostage now. A survivor from that same raid." Ryan's hands clenched around a sack of cornmeal. The accusations struck him like blows. After all these years, they thought him capable of such treachery, of hurting Aaliyah. He completed his purchases quickly. The ride home seemed longer, his thoughts darker. He lived with suspicion, but this was different. The army wouldn't let this rest. Back at the cabin, Ryan stored the supplies with mechanical movements. Aaliyah noticed his mood but didn't press. That evening, as always, she opened the Bible. "The Lord is my shepherd, I shall not want." Ryan sat with his rifle across his knees. His eyes kept straying to the window where darkness gathered. He knew they would come. Soldiers, bounty hunters, men seeking justice or glory. They would come with torches and accusations. "Yea, though I walk through the valley of the shadow of death, I will fear no evil, for thou art with me." Ryan's grip tightened on his rifle. He'd sworn never to raise arms against the army again. But if they threatened Aaliyah... Outside, a wolf howled, a long, lonely sound. Ryan recognized it as a warning. Something was moving below. Aaliyah looked up from the Bible, candlelight playing across her face. In these months, strength had returned to her voice. The thought of anyone threatening her peace made his blood run cold. "Something's troubling you," she said softly. It wasn't a question. Ryan paused. "Just weather changing," he said finally. "Spring brings all sorts through the valley." Aaliyah nodded. Though her eyes showed she knew there was more. The quiet sounds of her stitching filled the cabin. Ryan watched the darkness, his thoughts circling. He'd found unexpected peace caring for Aaliyah, a purpose he'd thought lost. Now that peace was threatened. The next morning brought a frosty dawn. Ryan rose before first light, gathering a hammer, nails, and lengths of pine. His movements were careful, but Aaliyah stirred. "What are you doing?" "Just some mending," he answered. Throughout the day he worked, reinforcing the doorframe, adding boards to weak spots, checking every shutter. It looked like simple spring maintenance, but Aaliyah watched him from her bed, noting how he scanned the tree line. When he came in for water, she caught his sleeve. "Something's wrong. You've been watching the valley like a hawk." He set the dipper down with a sigh. "Army's in the valley. They're asking questions about the raid." "What kind of questions?" "They think I had something to do with it." His voice was flat. "Word spread that I'm keeping you here against your will, a hostage." The color drained from Aaliyah's face. "But that's not true. You saved me." "Truth ain't always what men want to hear," Ryan said, "especially when they're hunting someone to blame." "What will they do?" "They'll come." He turned to face her. "When they do, it's best if you're not here. I know a place, a settler family down valley. They'll know what to do." Aaliyah's voice was firm. "I won't run and hide while you face this alone." "Aaliyah." "I won't." Her eyes blazed. "All my life, people have decided what's best for me, treated me like a burden. I won't let you do the same." Ryan studied her face, seeing not the broken woman from the snow, but someone stronger. "It could get dangerous." "Then I'll stand beside you," she said, her chin lifting. "Let them come. Let them see the truth." A hint of a smile touched his face. "You've got grit, girl." As evening approached, a soft knock sounded at the door. Ryan's rifle was in his hands instantly. After a moment, he opened it. A tall Apache man stood there, hands empty. Takakota, Ryan said, lowering his rifle. 3 winters, the man replied. I saw your smoke. Thought to pay my debt. The Apache's eyes took in everything. The fortified walls, the rifle, Aaliyah in her bed, but his expression revealed nothing. What debt? Aaliyah asked. Takakota glanced at Ryan, who nodded. He spared my life, Takakota explained. During the war, he found me wounded. Could have collected a bounty. Instead, he helped me heal. Ryan shifted. Did what any man should have. Few did, Takakota replied. He reached into his medicine pouch. I bring herbs for pain. He looked at Aaliyah. The kind that lives in body and spirit both. Aaliyah's eyes widened. How did you know? The mountains speak. They tell of a woman who lost her legs but found her heart. Takakota knelt beside her bed. My people say, true strength is not in what we carry, but in how we carry it. Tears welled in her eyes. A warrior fights from the heart, not the legs, he continued. You have a warrior spirit, mountain woman. The title settled around her shoulders like a mantle. She'd been daughter, burden, victim, survivor, but never warrior. Takakota studied the pine branches Ryan had gathered. This one, he said, selecting a sturdy limb. It speaks of strength. Ryan nodded, taking up his knife. Takakota guided his hands, showing him how to shape the first crutch. Aaliyah watched, hope and fear wrestling in her chest. The wood must be strong, Takakota explained, but gentle against the skin. Like a good horse, it carries weight but does not bite. Days passed as Ryan carved patiently. Finally, one morning, the crutches stood ready, their tops wrapped in soft deerskin. Are you ready? Ryan asked, his voice gentler than usual. Aaliyah nodded. Ryan and Takakota helped her sit up, then swing what remained of her legs over the edge of the bed. Remember, Takakota said softly, the earth welcomes all who walk upon it. Ryan handed her the crutches. Lean forward a bit. Let them take your weight. She gripped the smooth wood and pushed up. For one glorious moment, she was standing. Then her arms began shaking. The crutches slipped. She pitched forward. Strong hands caught her. Ryan and Takakota lifted her easily, no judgment in their faces. Again, Aaliyah whispered, tears stinging her eyes. They helped her reset. This time she managed 3 wobbling steps before collapsing. By midday, she was bruised and exhausted, but a seed of accomplishment had taken root. Enough for today, Ryan said. You done good. Tomorrow, she replied firmly. We try again. Each morning she practiced. Ryan and Takakota stayed close, catching her, offering encouragement. Like a young deer, Takakota observed. It falls many times before running free. One evening, Aaliyah overheard Ryan talking with Takakota outside. Town's full of poison talk, Ryan muttered, calling her the fat woman I'm keeping prisoner, saying I'm some kind of beast. Words are wind, Takakota replied. They cannot harm what is true. Ain't the words I'm worried about, it's what they might lead men to do. Aaliyah's heart ached, but she channeled the pain into determination. Each step was an answer to those whispers. One pristine morning, Aaliyah set a goal, to cross the entire yard. Ryan watched from the chopping block, trying to seem occupied but never taking his eyes off her. Step by step, she made her way across. Halfway, her crutch caught on a root, nearly sending her sprawling, but she caught herself and kept going. When she reached the far side, triumph exploded in her chest. She threw her head back and laughed, a sound of pure joy. Her legs might be gone, but she could move. She could live. Looking back, she caught Ryan trying to hide a smile. Their eyes met, and something passed between them. Pride, understanding, a shared victory. Well done, mountain woman, Takakota said quietly. I never thought I'd feel proud again, she admitted. Pride grows best in hard ground, he replied, like the flowers that bloom in rock cracks. Autumn painted the high country in golden crimson. That Sunday morning dawned clear and crisp. Ryan stood before a mirror, fighting with an old string tie. Here, let me help, Aaliyah offered from her chair. She had already dressed in her best dress, one they had altered together. Ryan moved closer, letting her fix the tie. There, she said. Now you look proper enough for church. Ain't been proper in 20 years, he muttered, but there was no bite in his words. The journey down the mountain was slow. Aaliyah sat proud, though her fingers gripped the seat tightly as they approached town. Ryan pulled the wagon to a stop beside the church. Well-dressed families climbed the stairs, pausing to stare. Whispers started. Is that the mountain man's woman? They said she lost her legs. Ryan stayed close as she began her slow ascent up the steps. Each one required careful positioning, balance, and strength. Sweat beaded on her forehead. Inside, a hush fell over the congregation. She felt every eye on her as she made her slow journey down the aisle. Click, swing, click, swing. Her crutches marked a steady rhythm. Ryan walked beside her, matching her pace. They settled into a pew near the back. She smoothed her skirt, feeling simultaneously exposed and strangely peaceful. The service began. Aaliyah sang softly at first, then with growing confidence. Ryan stood silent beside her, an anchor in strange waters. When the preacher rose, he paused, his eyes finding Aaliyah. Brothers and sisters, he began, we speak of faith moving mountains. But sometimes, he smiled directly at her, faith moves legs that ought not walk. Sometimes it sends angels in unexpected forms to lift us when we fall. A murmur rippled through the church. Heads turned toward Ryan, seeing for the first time not a feared mountain man, but someone capable of profound mercy. This morning, the preacher continued, we are blessed to witness such faith, a reminder that God's work shows itself in many ways. Someone began to clap. The sound spread, growing to warm, genuine applause. Aaliyah felt tears spill down her cheeks as she smiled, overwhelmed. After the service, they were surrounded. Women pressed forward with covered dishes and invitations. Children darted around Ryan's legs, no longer afraid. We've been baking extra, one woman said, pressing a casserole into Aaliyah's hands. The journey home was different, their wagon laden with gifts of food and friendship. The mountain air grew crisp. The cabin's warm light welcomed them home. Aaliyah settled into her chair while Ryan stoked the fire. Ryan, she said softly. He turned, firelight catching the silver in his beard. Maybe God's not done with either of us. Ryan stood still. When he nodded, she saw tears glistening in the firelight. No words were needed. Their hearts understood the miracle they had found. The autumn night settled cold and clear. Inside the cabin, Aaliyah sat by the hearth, wrapped in the warmth of the morning's welcome. You're humming, Ryan noted, a hint of amusement in his voice. Reckon I am, she smiled. It feels like everything's changing. His hand stilled on the rifle he was cleaning. He opened his mouth to respond, but another sound cut through the evening. Horses approaching, many of them, at speed. The cabin door burst open. Torchlight flooded the room as soldiers pushed inside, rifles raised. Their captain, a hard-faced man, stepped forward. Ryan Cutter, he announced, you're under arrest for conspiracy with raiders and holding this woman against her will. No, Aaliyah cried, struggling to rise. He saved my life. Two soldiers seized Ryan's arms. He didn't resist, but his eyes found hers, willing her to be still. The captain ignored her, reading from a wrinkled paper. Multiple witnesses place you near the wagon train before the attack. You were seen signaling to raiders. His lip curled. Then you rescued this woman, keeping her isolated for months. That's lies, Aaliyah's voice shook. He found me after my own family abandoned me. A young soldier snickered. Saved you? Look at you. No legs. Dependent on him. Some salvation. Ryan's muscles tensed, but he remained still as they shackled his wrists. The woman's obviously been corrupted by him, the captain declared. We'll send someone for her later. He jerked his head. Take him. Wait! Aaliyah struggled forward on her crutches. You can't do this! But they were already dragging Ryan outside. One soldier knocked her crutches aside, sending her sprawling. Through the open door, she saw more soldiers surrounding the cabin. The captain's voice rang out. Burn it. This place has sheltered a traitor long enough. No! Aaliyah crawled toward the door, smoke already curling through the cracks. A soldier glanced back, paused, then grabbed her crutches and tossed them out into the snow. Better hurry, he sneered, if you want those. The heat drove her out. She pulled herself through the drifts, gasping as the cold soaked through her clothes. Behind her, flames roared higher, consuming her sanctuary. She watched helplessly as everything they had built together burned. Once again, she lay abandoned in the snow. "Not again, Lord," she whispered. "Don't leave me alone again." The fire's heat couldn't reach her through the cold that settled into her bones. She watched as the roof beams crashed inward. The cold crept deeper. Aaliyah's wet clothes began to freeze. Her arms shook too badly to pull herself any further. She thought of that first night when Ryan had refused to let her die alone. Now she lay helpless again, watching him being marched away while their home turned to ash. "Please," she whispered, her voice growing faint. "Don't let it end like this." The wind howled, drowning out her words. Dawn crept over the mountains. Takakota moved silently through the trees, tracking the soldiers' trail. He had seen their torches from afar but arrived too late. He saw Aliyah's still form against the white snow. Frost had formed on her clothes and hair, but when he knelt, he felt the faint warmth of breath against his palm. "Sister," he said softly, "hold on." He built a lean-to and started a small fire. Gently, he lifted her closer to the warmth. Her eyelids fluttered. "The soldiers," she whispered. "They took Ryan." "I know," Takakota said, "but first you must live." He melted snow, adding herbs to make a broth. Color slowly returned to her cheeks. "We cannot stay here," he said. "The town is closest. Can you endure it?" Aaliyah nodded weakly. "I have to, for Ryan's sake." Takakota fashioned a crude sled. The journey down was slow and treacherous. Every bump sent waves of pain through her. They reached town as the sun was high. People stopped to stare. Outside the church, Martha Preston, the preacher's wife, hurried forward. "Lord have mercy," she breathed. "What happened?" Takakota explained. Martha's expression hardened. "Bring her inside." The women of the church carried Aliyah into a side room. They removed her frozen clothes and wrapped her in warm blankets. By nightfall, fever had set in. Dr. Williams came, his face grave. The exposure was severe. "Keep her warm and pray." Through the long night, the women took turns sitting with her. In her delirium, she called out for Ryan. "He's innocent. He saved me." Meanwhile, Takakota moved through the town like a shadow, listening, speaking quietly. He told the true story of how Ryan had found Aaliyah abandoned and dying, how he had cared for her. In the saloon, men argued. Some still called Ryan a savage, but others remembered his quiet acts of kindness. "Don't seem like no prisoner to me," one old-timer mused. The women, touched by Aaliyah's plight, brought food and supplies. They listened as she spoke of Ryan's gentleness, his patience. Their fear began to fade. 3 days passed. Aaliyah's fever broke. She opened her eyes to find Martha Preston beside her. "Welcome back, dear. We've been powerful worried." "Ryan?" Aaliyah whispered. "Do you know where they took him?" "Fort Carson, we think," Martha said. "The military justice there is harsh. But don't you worry. God hasn't brought you this far to abandon you." Aaliyah closed her eyes, her lips moving in silent prayer. She had lost her family, her legs, her home, but something new had grown, a community willing to see the truth. "Thank you," she whispered, "for not leaving me alone." The guardhouse at Fort Carson was cold. Ryan Cutter sat on a narrow bench, his wrists in shackles. Captain James Morton paced before him. "You understand the gravity of these charges, Cutter? Collaboration with hostiles. The evidence suggests you've been feeding information to the tribes." Ryan said nothing. "3 wagons lost in the past month," Morton continued. "Good families murdered. And every time the raiders know exactly where to strike. Curious, isn't it? With you living up there, watching everything." Still, Ryan was silent. He thought of Takakota. One word from him could condemn his friend. That word would never pass his lips. Lieutenant Parker stepped forward. "We know about your Apache friend, Cutter. Talk now, and maybe we can show leniency." Ryan lifted his head. "Reckon you boys already made up your minds about me. Nothing I say will change that." Morton slammed his hand against the wall. "Damn your stubbornness. People are dying." "People been dying since the first wagon crossed these mountains," Ryan replied evenly. "Ain't always clear who's to blame." "Your trial starts tomorrow," the captain said. Without your cooperation, it won't be pleasant. Back in town, Aaliyah gripped her crutches. The trial is tomorrow, she said, her voice firm. I have to be strong enough to testify. She took a step, sweat beading on her forehead. Each movement was a battle, but she fought on. They'll twist your word, Sarah Miller warned. Army trials ain't known for mercy. Aaliyah paused. Then they need to hear the truth even more. Ryan saved my life when my own kin left me to die. Dr. Williams arrived. The journey could kill you, he said bluntly. You're still weak. Aaliyah met his gaze. And if I don't go, they could hang an innocent man. The doctor sighed. At least let us arrange a wagon. But Aaliyah shook her head. I need to walk in on my own power. The court needs to see I'm not a victim. They need to see my strength. As evening approached, she knelt beside her bed, her prayers intense. Lord, she whispered, help me stand tomorrow. Help me speak truth to power. The church women gathered around, their voices rising and falling like gentle waves. In his cell, Ryan lay awake, thinking of Aaliyah's courage, her unwavering faith. Whatever tomorrow brought, he knew he had done right by her. That gave him peace, even in chains. The town hall's benches creaked under the weight of anxious spectators. Captain Morton stepped forward. We present evidence that Ryan Cutter has been complicit in raids against settlers. We found maps in his cabin marking wagon train routes. Murmurs rippled through the crowd. Ryan remained still. He had used those maps to guide lost travelers, to find stranded families. But explaining would mean betraying Takakota. Just as Morton prepared to call another witness, the doors swung open. Takakota stood there, tall and dignified. Gasps erupted. I come in peace, he said, to speak truth. The preacher, Reverend Matthews, stood. Let him speak. God's truth knows no boundaries. Takakota moved forward. 3 winters ago, I led a war party against Ryan Cutter. We were wrong. He showed mercy. He bound our wounds and shared his food. The room fell silent. Since then, I have watched him help both my people and yours. The maps you hold mark safe passages, not raiding routes. Before Morton could respond, another commotion at the door. All heads turned as Aaliyah appeared, supported by her crutches. Her face was pale, but her eyes blazed. Each step echoed as she made her slow way forward. The journey had taken hours, each step a battle. Your Honor, she said, I must speak. I was there, Aaliyah cut in. The night you claim Ryan Cutter aided raiders. My family was in that train. When they attacked, our wagon overturned. My legs were crushed. Her voice caught, but she pressed on. My own kin left me there, to die in the snow. But Ryan Cutter found me. This man you called dangerous. He carried me through a blizzard to save my life. He tended my wounds. He taught me to live again. The silence in the room was absolute. Look at me, she said, her voice ringing. I stand before you on legs of wood, but I stand. I live because this man refused to abandon a stranger. Reverend Matthews rose, moving to stand beside her. Gentlemen, I've served this community for 15 years. If I thought for one moment that Ryan Cutter was responsible for such deaths, I would say so. Instead, I see a man who demonstrates the very mercy we claim to represent. Aaliyah swayed, her strength failing. The preacher caught her, but her eyes remained fixed on the tribunal. The judge, who had remained silent, finally spoke. We have heard accusations born of fear, but we have also heard testimony born of gratitude. The evidence against Ryan Cutter is circumstantial. The evidence for his character is before us in flesh and blood. He gestured to Aaliyah. This woman lives because of his mercy. The Apache scout speaks of his honor. These are not the actions of a traitor. The judge's gavel cracked. Insufficient evidence. Case dismissed. The room erupted. Aaliyah's eyes were fixed only on Ryan as soldiers removed his shackles. Their gazes met, a moment of quiet understanding. She had not abandoned him, just as he had not abandoned her. The morning after the trial, the soldiers packed their gear and marched out of town, their proud formation masking their shame. As they left, the town transformed. Women gathered in kitchens, baking pies and bread. Never thought I'd be baking for Ryan Cutter, Martha Preston chuckled. The Lord works in mysterious ways. Men gathered, discussing plans to rebuild his cabin. Even those who had once mocked him now offered their help. "Reckon we owe him," one said. "Man's been watching over this valley all these years. We just didn't see it." The caravan of wagons creaked up the mountain trail, loaded with supplies and willing hands. They found Ryan and Aaliyah already clearing charred timbers. "You folks didn't have to come," Ryan said gruffly. Reverend Matthews stepped forward. "No, we didn't have to. We wanted to. That's what neighbors do." The work began. The new cabin took shape quickly. They built it larger, with extra windows and a doorway wide enough for Aaliyah's crutches. As afternoon's shadows lengthened, the women unveiled a feast. Ryan stood apart, overwhelmed. Aaliyah made her way to his side. "Quite a change from yesterday," she said softly. He nodded, words stuck in his throat. Then he bowed his head. "Lord," he said, his voice rough, "thank you. Been a long time since I... Thank you for mercy I didn't earn." Aaliyah's heart swelled. She'd watched this man save her life, teach her to live, face false accusations. Now she watched him find his way back to faith. The new cabin stood solid, a restoration of belonging, of community. As the sun set, the townspeople left with promises to return. They left behind a transformed homestead and a transformed man, both rebuilt by mercy. Winter settled over the mountains, a thick blanket of white. Inside the rebuilt cabin, golden lamplight spilled across the new floors. The hearth crackled. Aaliyah sat in her chair, the worn Bible open on her lap. Her crutches rested nearby. She read aloud, her voice strong and clear. Ryan sat by the window whittling a piece of pine, his face soft in the lamplight. Takakota sat near the hearth, sipping coffee, nodding at the scripture's wisdom. Their unlikely circle was a testament to bridges built and prejudices overcome. "I thought losing my legs ended me," Aaliyah said softly. "But God used it to begin me." Ryan paused his whittling. "And used you to redeem me," he replied, his voice gentle. The silence that followed was deep and comfortable. The fire popped, sending sparks up the chimney. These three outcasts, the abandoned daughter, the feared mountain man, and the lone Apache scout, had been forged into something new. Like the cabin rising from ashes, they had been transformed. The fire burned steady and bright as night deepened, its warmth a promise of shelter for any other lost souls who might find their way to this place of grace. Drop a comment below and share which part of the world you're tuning in from today. These stories remind us that life is more than headlines. It's about heartlines. If you enjoyed this story, don't forget to subscribe for more.